Hey guys, today I'm going to be talking about Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert. This book was a pleasure to read, and I'm going to highly recommend it for any creatives out there who are interested in getting involved in the creative process. Now, before I go into some of the reasons why I think this is a necessary book for any of you creative people out there, and why if you're not creative, you should definitely get on the creative path, I'd advise you guys to please check out my YouTube channel, subscribe, leave a comment below, leave a like. It really goes a long way for me making these videos. Now, some of the things that stood out with this book, Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert, is that she's taking a very radical stance in comparison to where a lot of creative people are in their own creative journeys. Because I've known plenty of creative people, and that the way that they approach their creativity is, I have something, I have an idea in mind, I want to go out and create something in the world. And to bring it out into being, to bring it out of me and my soul, I have to strain. I have to suffer. I have to put myself in terrible conditions so that I can feel the muse and so that the world can speak to me. And this is sort of the idea that we have about artists, right? That they are people who really struggle to survive. They make a meager wage, and they really struggle to bring their creativity out into the world. But in reality, she shows us another way that is something that speaks really close to me and hits home. When I first started being a creative person, which is when I just started dabbling in poetry, fiction, and things like that, I used to really put myself in imaginable suffering like positions where I would close myself indoors. I would just sit alone and brood, and I believed that this was the only way that I could sort of create, that I could bring out my creative capacity. And it led to a lot of insecurities about the creations that I was bringing out, because like she alludes to in the book, is that, you know, when you look at it more as a career instead of a vocation, when you look at your creativity as something that you have to do because it's an identity factor instead of something that you're just bringing out of the world in a very whimsical way, it puts a lot of stress and strain on the creative process. You start to develop anxiety related to the creative process, and it doesn't allow you to flow in a more fluid and artistic and authentic way. Because then you're really comparing yourself to all the other creatives out there, and you start to interject these feelings. And some of the feelings that she touches upon in this book are, a lot of people, they won't even get to the steps or the stage where they can be creative because they tell themselves like, hey, I'm not good enough yet. I'm not where I need to be yet. Or what if somebody else judged this work as being not valuable? Or I'm really just writing creative stuff about, I don't know, like a brick of cheese, you know? Or I just created this like little silly necklace. And so a lot of people, they feel a certain way about their creativity. And these feelings, these anxieties, they do nothing but limit us at the end of the day. Because if you really took that same creativity and you were ambivalent about it, and you felt really great about it, well then it wouldn't really matter to you the result. And she touches in the book about having a devotional path towards your creativity, because once you start looking at your creativity like it's a vocation and you're devoted to that path, you stop really caring what someone else might think or how you feel about it, because you realize that that's the only road that you're going down. And there's less financial strain because you realize now that the finances are just there to back up your own creative process. You know, and I could go in ad infinitum about how creativity, even if you're not somebody who's creative, quote unquote, is going to help you better express yourself in your life, right? Like you can think of somebody who's at a 9-to-5 job and then they go and they hit some drums or they play the guitar, right? They relieve a lot of stress. But she tries not to redact that just down to a stress relieving tool. It's not just a stress relieving tool. What creativity is in some form it's a therapeutic process, yes, but it's fun. And I think that's where we sort of lose the forest for the trees, like they say. Because once you look at the creative process as something that's fun, you can really start to lose yourself in it. And you stop taking it so seriously. And this is a point that she harkens on often in this book, is that treat creativity like it's a whim. Treat it like it's fun. You know, because I think the best artists are the ones that are having fun with their creativity. There are artists, and she mentions them, that suffer very deeply from their creative inspiration, but there are also the contrary. And what that tells us is that there's numerous ways to be creative, right? And so if you're bringing something out in the world, you don't have to approach it from a negative light. It's all about how you choose to associate with it, right? And that's a conscious choice that you can make, even with unconscious factors that seem to really hold you back. Because once you start looking at creativity through what she calls inquisitiveness, once you start being curious and stop feeling like there are external pressures on you, that's when you start to actually deal with emotional gaps that you might have or emotional stressors, and use the creative process as a way to investigate those. And it's also the same for your intellectual process, because when you're in the flow-like state, when you're being creative, you experience some of your most intellectual and emotional heights that you will ever experience in this world. And she understands that very well, and that's what I got in this. Because through all the chapters, from enchantment to persistence, down to a chapter where she talks about having big trust, right, in the creative process, it all comes down to this idea of faith and just having fun. It's like, I know I'm going there. I have a destination to go. I know I'm already headed there. So in the meantime, why don't I just explore? Why don't I smell the flowers? Why don't I take a look at these trees? Why don't I actually live the full experience instead of me being so focused on getting to the net outcome that I can't actually experience the world around me? And that's something that we can all take out of the creative experience, right? Because there's nothing like that time that you spend that you feel like you're fully in flow, that you're fully in your being, that you're almost transported to another place in this world. And I think for a lot of people, she doesn't really get into it that much in this book. A lot of people, it's like a religious experience, right? And that's why I think she's alluding to it in terms of faith, in terms of trust. Because once you're in that flow-like state, you really feel it's paradoxical. She gets into these paradoxes a little bit about how creativity could be everything to us and how it could really be really nothing, right? And one of the ways she gets into that is by saying, like, hey, agriculture existed for something like 20,000 years. Creativity has existed for 70,000 years. It's almost 50,000 more years, and yet there's a certain irony in that because nobody needs creativity. She says that creativity is whimsical. Nobody needs creativity to survive. In terms of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, creativity is not at the bottom. It's not the sex drive. It's not food. It's not water, right? So we don't need creativity, and yet we all engage in it. And so why do we all engage in it? And it's because it's something that allows us, right? Two things, and these are very paradoxical. In one way, it roots us in our sense of self. It roots us into feeling that I am being, right, in space and time. But it also divorces us from our sense of self to where we lose track of where we are, and we go and we're lifted to somewhere else in this world. And those are two things that are very paradoxical, surface level. How could I be so deeply in touch with myself and yet be somewhere else entirely? And I think it's an experience that you can only really understand if you've been in the creative process, if you've really enmeshed yourself in that environment. And one of the reasons I try to get a lot of my friends and other people to experiment with different things is because I've seen the great outcomes and the great things that have resulted from that, right? For people who are dealing with depression, so they used creativity as some sort of tool for that, or people who are just happy, they went and created and they felt even happier, right? I do think that it's just a net positive for us all. And that, coupled with the factor that creativity, when you are being creative, it doesn't require as much time as you might typically think. What she mentioned in this book, and what I really like, is that she touches on how there are numerous artists out there in the world that are just like carving out pockets of time to be creative. 20 minutes, 30 minutes, right? 40 minutes a day, right? They're on lunch break, and that's all the time they have to write a poem, they write a poem. Or that's all the time they have to make some sort of paper mache project, or even sculpt a little bit. And they find these pockets in the day. And it's like, as long as you can find these little pockets, you can always add that sense of energy and big magic into your life. And what she really is, when she's alluding to the big magic, she's alluding to the unseen that a lot of creatives seem to be in tap with. We often see creatives with like the piercings everywhere and the tattoos everywhere, and some people might be like a little bit taken aback by that. Like, why is it so out there? Why is it so alive? And I think that's, for a lot of us, it's because, you are so alive and so in touch with your soul that you can't help but see like how temporal all this is, how temporal the human experience is, how short we are to really live in our lives, right? And an attitude that she touches on that a lot of creatives have is that it is a whimsical life. And since it is whimsical, why not play? Why not have fun? Why not have fun with your body, right? And she notes somebody who's a woman that she knew that always got a new tattoo, and it seemed like every time she saw her, she got a new tattoo. And then she asked her, like, hey, why are you getting all these new tattoos? Aren't you afraid of what's going to happen to your body? And she responded, like, I already know what's going to happen to my body. It's going to go away. And since it's going away anyhow, why don't I just play with it in the meantime? And I'm not saying that's going to be the attitude that everyone has, but I'm saying that that attitude is really the attitude of the creative spirit, saying like, hey, I'm in here for an unknowable amount of time. Why don't I play around and experiment and see what I can get out of it? And if you take the stressors out of your creative process, if you take all the anxieties and the feelings out of it, and you say like, hey, you know, there is no better or worse art, quote unquote, right? There is, it's subjective, and there is an amount of interpretation in that. So if you can actually look at it from that perspective, whether or not it's correct, objectively speaking, if you can look at it from that perspective, then you can stop hindering your own progress, and you can start making the small little changes in your life that are going to shoot you forward in a really big way, right? And that's why she's getting into this whole idea of enchantment too, because when we look at it, she talks about inspiration, how all creation comes in some sense from inspiration, but sometimes you're going to be there, you're going to suffer, you're going to struggle, right? But if you can keep this whole idea that as long as I keep the pendulum swinging, as long as the train is still leaving, as long as the car is still in drive, eventually I'm going to hit a green light, or I'm going to make it past my stop. And it's because inspiration comes and goes. She talks about how ideas, they flow back and forth, and you might have an idea. If you don't act on that idea, it'll go away, poof, and you'll be like, where'd my idea go? And that's because the idea, and she personifies it here, transported to someone else, right? Somebody else has that idea now, you don't have it. So in that case, do you just give up on your idea? You might have to give up on that idea, but there's another idea around the corner. And so you can think of these ideas like spirits that are around us. You know, you have an idea pop in your head, and you're like, oh, I want to express that, and you go. But the only way that you really call these ideas forward is if you start imbuing your life with what she's talking about here. And that's an openness to creativity, an openness to being inspired, right? Don't look at your life like it's a strain. Don't look at creativity like it's a stressful thing. Look at it like it's a love affair. And she says this. She says if you treat your creativity like it's a love affair, if you dress up in the morning, if you look at it like somebody who's having an affair looks at their the person that they want to be with, right? It's very much like, hey, I want to be with him now. So I go, and it's like, I might only be able to catch 15 minutes of a smooch. I'm going to get that 15 minutes in, and then I'm going to be back. And it's so passionate. And even though she says here, hey, treat it out of curiosity and not passion, because the passion will burn fast, and the curiosity will last a lifetime, she does mean that whenever you're in the creative act, you want to fully envelop yourself in the present being. And really, I think a big part that she didn't necessarily touch in here, but a big part of creativity is being in touch with the present, right? Having presence of mind to be able to enter a space that so few go. And if more people went in that space, if more people explored that space, explored their ideas, saw where their ideas led, if they felt more comfortable, if they took out what she calls a need for permission, because a lot of people feel that they need a permission. They need somebody to tell them, hey, you are right to pursue your creative path, right? If you completely took out the external environment and you just did what was incumbent upon you and your soul, you would get somewhere further than anyone else is headed, right? Because it's not a competition. It's all in your mind. And so if you're pursuing that which is in your mind, nobody else has access to that. And that's why you're already ahead of the game, right? Because most people are not thinking with that attitude. And most people are not looking at creativity like it is big magic. And so I highly recommend this book for any of you out there who are interested in honing their creative craft and becoming better creatives in general and improving your life, because I truly believe creativity is a gift to us all and we all stand to improve it. Check out this book, hit subscribe, hit like, please leave a comment below. What did you think about some of these thoughts? What did you think about this book if you've read it? I'd be really interested to know. I'll talk to you guys next time.